Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Yorkshire Gamer Elite Big War Games podcast. And here we are on episode 73. And today is a revisit of our journey into the investigation into the German raid on the Isle of Wight in World War II, which has been very kindly shared with us by Paul Thompson from Early War Miniatures. And if you haven't already, there are two previous episodes in relation to this. I give the numbers during the course of the interview. But don't worry, if you haven't listened to those, I think we deliberately made sure that we gave a bit of a summary at the start of this episode to make sure that you had the basic facts. And if you are interested at the end of it, you can always go back and take a deep dive with the other episodes. It's only an hour, just over, so I'm going to take an opportunity here to just talk about a couple of other things. Don't normally do long talks at the start of a show, normally because we've got 3 or 4 hours to get through. But on this one, I'm just going to cover a couple of things off that are ongoing in Yorkshire Gamer. I was down at the Partisan show in Newark last weekend and took the AWI Germantown game down, which included the figures from my friend Dave Parrott, who passed away. Those of you who are regular listeners to the show will remember the story behind that. Great day, great show, loads of absolutely fantastic games, and we'd got some information and posters, etc., from Dogs Trust, which was Dave's chosen charity, and we had those on display at the table. I didn't really want to kind of push the charity thing and trying to get people to donate and all that sort of stuff, but I might have been a little bit too subtle. I think the game wasn't picked up by any of the magazines, War Games Illustrated, WSS, etc., who have their social media presence, and I was hoping that I would get a bit of that with the Dog Trust element. But it's their magazines; they can post whatever they want. I get plenty of coverage on my channel. It would have been nice to get a little bit of coverage for Dave's charity, but there you go. You can't have everything. So it was a great day, and my apologies to everyone who came over to the table. Unfortunately, my leg issue, my mobility issue, is getting worse, and unfortunately, I didn't feel too well. The way that I didn't at Salute as well, so I had to sit down for most of the day, which meant that I was sat talking to people rather than my usual self, stood up and chatting with people around the table. So apologies if I missed you. I certainly wasn't, as somebody suggested, chatting with my mates. It's quite interesting that you get complaints that you don't talk to people at tables, and then when you do talk to people at your table, someone complains you're chatting with your mates. So, um, yeah, it's because I'm waiting for an operation, you bellend. So I had to sit down, unfortunately. So anyway, that's my apologies to everyone. It was a great show, fantastic for our hobby to see so many brilliant tables in one location. And congratulations to the organisers, Lawrence and Trix, again for a fantastic day for everyone. Before we go to the interview, I just want to talk to you about one more thing, and that is an event that's happening as it does every year now. This is the third one that I've done, and that's the Yorkshire Gamer World Cup. And having done manufacturers and having done rules and having gained 40,000 votes, would you believe, over those two World Cups, um, I'm now going to find out what you really don't like. So, if you go over to the Yorkshire Gamer Reap Big Facebook group, then the preliminary round for the Yorkshire Gamer World Cup of Wargaming Pet Hates is on the go at the moment. Being voted for, this is released on the 28th of May, and the voting is open until Monday, the 2nd of June, for this particular part of the World Cup. So, what drives you nuts in the hobby? Regular listeners will know the War Games Room 101 feature, and this is kind of an extension of that. So we've got 8 seeds who have been picked by me, and they are going to go straight into round two. They are competition games, round dice, points battles, painting Portaloo, dice with unclear faces, unpainted flag edges, factions, and Sabo bases. So the vote that's going on at the moment is for the 16 qualifiers. So we've currently got 44 nominations, and the voting's been going for 3 days. We've got 2,500 votes already, and the top 16 will go through. The 116 with the most votes will go through to the first round proper. Exactly the same format as the previous 2 World Cups, and the draw for the first round will happen during the Brews in the Binyard episode, which is going to be the next one recorded on D-Day, the 6th of June. So, get along to the Yorkshire Gamer Reap Big Wargames group on Facebook and cast your vote. My apologies that I can't run it anywhere else other than Facebook. I have looked at this before, and unfortunately, there just aren't any other alternatives. I've already had 2,500 votes in the first couple of days, so the reach is massive on Facebook. And if you're on Facebook, it's easy to do, no problems whatsoever. Some people have issues with Facebook. That's fine. My issue is that I have a job, I have a life, and I have a family, and I can't spend every day on sorting this out. So I can't, for example, have votes in multiple locations. It's just too difficult to run. It has taken, I think there's 150 comments or something already on Facebook posts. So managing the voting, it's not possible to do it in multiple locations. Too much time. I've looked at things like SurveyMonkey and other independent sites, but the feedback I've had from that is that they just generate masses of spam emails, and you have to sign up to this and sign up to that, and you're getting pop-ups, and I don't want that for the members of this group. So my apologies, but it's got to be Facebook. And if you're not on there, get somebody else to vote for you. And you can usually view it rather than join from outside. And we're going to have a lot of fun with it, as we always do. Some people have taken it way too seriously already, but that's just the territory with something that's popular. So let's move on and go to our interview. And it's just over an hour long, as I said at the start. And there are some fantastic discoveries and developments in this story. And I'll let you listen to it, but I think this is like top groundbreaking history find, however you want to explain it. And, this should be on We Have Ways or History Channel or whatever. And I'm sure it will be in the future, because the discoveries that Paul has made through his extremely hard work and the dedication of him and the team that he's got with him to recover thousands of objects from the scene of this potential World War II raid on the Isle of Wight in August 1943, catalogue them, investigate them, and look at the context, look at where items are located within the field. I think it's brilliant, proper forensic stuff, and I hope you enjoy this update from Paul. This really is groundbreaking stuff. So get your brew, sit back, enjoy for the next hour or so, and I'll see you on the other side. So without further ado, here's the interview. I nearly forgot. Here's a word from our sponsors.
On your holes? Don't know who to fly with? Then why don't you go up and away with Yorkshire Airlines? Our Air Dorises will always give you the warmest of welcomes.
Wipe my bloody feet!
Our flight crew are the very best.
This is Captain Boycott speaking. During the flight, we'll be flying at whatever height I like for as long as I bloody like, because I'm captain, right?
And your safety is our concern.
Right, you lot. Shut up, belt up, and if you can't see the bloody exits,
You must be bloody blind.
Yorkshire Airlines, departing Leeds International Airstrip, touching down 20 minutes later at Leeds International Airstrip. Because if it's outside Yorkshire, it's not worth bloody visiting.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Yorkshire Gamers Elite Big War Games podcast. And for episode 73, we're catching up with an old friend of the show. And it's Paul Thompson from Early War Miniatures. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Ken. Lovely to speak to you again. If it was only since a week since we last met.
It certainly was, mate. And we were down at Partisan for the first of two shows in the year there, and I thought it was another excellent event. How did you think it went?
Partisan just seems to be getting better and better, Ken. For us, it was a really, really busy show. There were so many good things to see there and do there. I know they tried a little experiment with table sales as well this year with the marquee at the front. But Partisan is just the best showcase for our hobby, I think. Lots of quality games, loads of great people, lots of conversations going on around tables, in between tables. Just a great show.
Yeah, it certainly was, and I didn't get a chance to even go in that little tent in the front, so I don't know whether you managed to have a wander.
I attempted to have a quick look in there as the queue was making its way in and thought that's not a good idea to do that. So I went back to my stand. So I didn't get a chance to peruse the table sales, which is always one of my favourites, other events that are held at that show ground. But no, it's just, I really like what the team are doing there and organising that event. So no, great show, really good show.
Yeah, the ability for them to get so many high quality tables historical tables in one location is credit to the guys who run it. Trix and Lawrence, really kudos to them guys for giving it a go. And how did the Early War Miniatures stand go, mate? Were the figures flying off the shelves?
Figures, models, scenics, all sorts. It was a really good day for us. It needed to be, really, because I had the nightmare scenario the week before, Ken, where my ever-trusty van of 12 years decided to break down on the Isle of Wight towing a big exhibition trailer.
Oh, no.
I know. So I was faced with Monday morning with no working van. Luckily there was one on the island. It was very suitable. I ended up buying it, taking delivery of it on the Tuesday, and then fitting it out Wednesday, Thursday to take all the racks. And then we gave it our first outing with it on the trip up to Partisan Saturday morning.
So the old van then, Paul, is it no more? Is it not repairable? Has it gone to the great van graveyard in the sky?
No, not at all. Actually, I managed to fix the bugger on Friday afternoon after I got the van loaded, with some help. It was with some help, though, Ken. There's an absolutely brilliant vehicle electrician. Long story short, who came out, diagnosed the fault, charged me a very reasonable fee for 2 hours of his time. I ordered the part. It arrived Friday. Once the van was loaded, I thought I'll fit it. Broom, up she started. So, but it's knowing what part it was and other things. So I'll have to sell that on there because I do like the new van.
Yeah. So Early War Miniatures, we can sell you your miniatures, but we can also fix your van.
Well, yeah, I had a lot of practice at fixing vehicles. We went to Bovingdon Tank Museum in the light strike vehicle I've got. 2 weeks before with a good friend of mine who's got a sandrail, and we did a bit of a display hooning around the tank arena. He busted his gearbox. Yeah, it was great. I didn't get any air on the main hump. I was told not to, but we were bouncing it around good and proper. Anyway, he shredded his gearbox, and then on the last trip round, we had a big problem. So for 2 hours, we were fixing that in the car park. So it's been one of those weeks, actually, the last 2 weeks, fixing things.
Multi-skilled, mate, multi-skilled. And before we go on to our main topic, what's happening in the world of Early War Miniatures then? It'd be a shame not to have you on if you didn't tell us what's new, what's coming up.
Right. Okay. So I've been on a bit of a First War bend. The mojo was very much in the sphere of First War, and so I set myself some quite delicious new First War models have been made, figures mainly, and using a couple of new techniques. So where separate heads have been a very successful thing for us now. So we tend to provide separate heads in our infantry and unit packs,
it's a
mainly
nice
because you
option.
can, just by twisting it slightly, you can change the look of a unit.
Yeah.
But I've been working on a separate right arm, particularly for those kind of separate running sort of running pose or moving forward pose, and just with the advent of putting the arm slightly bent, holding a rifle up, or holding your arm straight with the rifle out, maybe carrying some equipment, maybe pointing with the other hand holding the rifle. Interesting set of almost uncastable poses are created because that arm, if it was cast one piece, you'd create undercuts. And after Partisan, I met my good mates, Mr. Perry and co. And over a fine curry in Nottingham, our third one in 3 days, I might add, because there's no good curry house on the Isle of Wight.
You need to come up to Bradford, mate.
I would have to come to Bradford, Ken. You could take me some fine curry houses. Having a curry with Alan, he was talking about how he's just done that with his new release of French 1790s infantry, with some of them having a separate right arm to achieve exactly the same thing. They're uncastable single poses, but with that arm being separate, you can create a level of animation in the figure pose and put different things in the hand. So it was nice to think he was copying me. Not really. He says
Perry,
quickly, not at all, Alan.
Yeah. Perry's, I taught them everything they know, says Paul
They bloody
Thompson.
have. They've been doing it for bloody years, and they are just the best at it as well.
Yeah,
so it was just nice to get that idea validated. I wasn't the only one being stupid. I thought, perhaps it will work, won't work. It's a little bit more overhead on people when they buy the pack, but I think the extra poses you get from that really make it worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, actually, Paul. I think I'm not a massive fan of plastic figures, I have to say, but one of the advantages is that ability to just slightly change the pose with every single figure. So with a unit, and you as a manufacturer, it's difficult for you to produce 20 variations of one figure. It's not practical, is it, financially? So if you can do that, separate heads, separate arms, maybe, that then gives the purchaser the opportunity to do what you would do with plastic, but do it in metal, which is obviously a much better.
I'm totally with you, Ken. I've always been a preferred metal, actually, and although I've had plastic figures in my time, so I just now finalised on a very simple post arrangement and socket in the body of the figure, and it's like a conical shape, so it allows for a bit of wiggle room as well, and a very simple job of good quality super glue in there, and then just second or two for it to set, and you've got a new figure pose. It's quite an easy thing to do.
Brilliant. And what range is that going to come into?
Okay, so the first ones, which are not on the website yet, and there's a good reason for that, I'll explain during our podcast.
You've broken it, yeah.
No, I didn't break it. So it's in many of the new 1914 British and Commonwealth troop ranges, which include Indian infantry for Europe and the Far East, as well as your classic Tommies with the field caps, the gore blimey hats, and then helmets and gas masks, and also a new range of beautiful Belgian figures, which is suitable for the first 1914, early 1915 conflicts, and they all benefit from that, particularly the cavalry. Actually, there's a whole selection of very beautiful cavalry figures, and they all have different arms, holding a bugle, pointing a sword, just pointing, waving the unit forwards, carrying a carbine, those kind of things. So that one simple action creates so many new poses.
Brilliant. Looking forward to seeing some of those. Any new vehicles out of the garage?
The model garage for sure, and it's an obscure one. You know me, I like obscure stuff.
Oh God, yes.
There is a Carden Lloyd tankette, which was bought by the Japanese and used mainly in China, I have to say, but used in other places too. So it's a beautiful little tankette with a fully enclosed cupola with two crewmen, and one-piece casting, apart from the turret hatch and the crew, if you want to have those, or just stick the turret hatch closed. And it's a little one-piece model. It's a master from my good Dutch friend Jan Gisbers, and when he was over here last year, he brought it with him last summer. I actually got it made and sent him copies of it as part of the payment for using the master. And he's been selling it now at shows for about 4 or 5 months. So I thought I'd better put it on the website. So it is on the website.
Brilliant. And now you've got your new van, mate. What's your next show? Where you're displaying your wares next?
Next wargaming show is Partisan again, actually, in October.
Yeah, it seems to be, doesn't it? It seems to be, certainly for me as well, in terms of display games. There's like a break, isn't there, for the summer?
Yes, yeah, very much so. I was considering going to Colours again, but there's some really cool stuff going on the island, and I love island life so much. I'd rather do that than go to another wargame show when Partisan is such a good one to wait and to look forward to.
No, exactly. Well, the reason we've got you on, Paul, as you no doubt know, because we spoke about it at Partisan, is your wonderful investigation into a German raid on the Isle of Wight during World War II. And if I remember correctly, Paul, it's August 1943.
Correct. Yes, Ken. Night of the 15th, 16th August, 1943.
Brilliant. And for those listeners who might be new to the story, then if you go back and listen to episode 43, which was the first episode I did with Paul, that covers all the background and everything about Paul's history with wargaming and early war miniatures, and we spoke about it, the basics on that program as kind of a part of the overall interview. And then we came back at episode 63 when Paul had got some results he could tell us from the archaeological work that had been done. And we've got some more results, haven't we, Paul?
We have, Ken. We achieved a pretty major milestone in the investigation process, and the final confirmations came into us in middle of March this year, and it's quite a significant series of conclusions, should we say?
Brilliant. Well, just before we go into the meat and veg, let's have an entree. So, if you could kind of give us your best couple of minute elevator pitch on how it started and where we are, just so that people new coming to this have got an idea where we are before we go off into numbers on the back of bullet cases and all that sort of stuff. Is that all right, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of thought we'd bought to do that anyway. So although it's surprising the number of people come up to me at shows and say they've listened to your show and how they're interested in this investigation that's going on.
I'm the same, Paul. I've had loads of people's, and I've had a couple of kind of historian types who go, "Oh, that's a load of rubbish, that is," and then they listen to the second one, especially the episode 63, where we started talking about your methods of recovering objects, etc., and they all went, "Ooh,
yes,
now I'm interested."
Yeah.
So just give us a little kind of sojourn down the story so far.
Okay, whistle stop then. So 8 years ago, a book was published, 8.5 years ago, a book was published by a local author called Adrian Searle, and the book was called Churchill's Last Wartime Secret. Before I moved to the island, I managed to come in December, saw a copy and bought it, read it 2 days and thought, I'm actually staying literally the next bay round from where this is supposed to have happened. So I went and visited the site. My first visit to the site was December 2016. From there, I just got more and more involved really with it and doing some of my own research. I had been in conversation with the author, but he sadly passed away, be 3 years nearly now. And in that time, I was able to kind of do an awful lot of research and, long story short, created what my professor I've been working with called a historical hypothesis. So He reviewed all of my documents and work and basically said, Paul, what you need to do now is a small ground study to either prove what your hypothesis suggests or to disprove it. Now, organising an archaeological style ground study is not something I've ever done before. Professor Simons was brilliant in helping and advising me. Long story short, I teamed up with a museum on the Isle of Wight called the Wight Aviation Museum, and they sponsored me with both the landowner, and then we had to get permissions from Natural England because the whole site is a treble SI, which is a site of special scientific interest, and you need permission to do digs and things on there. So eventually I put a full proposal together that was accepted, and we got to break ground in January 2024. Now, initially, the professor had expected to find maybe 60, 70 objects over a 3-day period. We were searching areas, basically 3 fields, which are about 40 metres by 40 metres. Every object was recorded, depth, location, exactly, so we can recreate a matrix of where these things were found. And just like Montgomery, my first contact with the enemy, first day of the dig, our plan was blown out of the water. And that's because in the first day, the first morning, the 40 metre by 30 metre field we marked out, we had to mark all signals with a visible tag from the air and then take some drone pictures to hopefully look for clusters. Well, basically, one end of the field was one gigantic cluster. There were 550 signal tags showing in that small area. And eventually, under each one of those, there was between 1 and 7 objects. So there's no way we were going to do that in one day. Moving on, we did the 3 days we'd planned. There was other features and other things that started to appear from the objects we were finding, which were of interest. And so we got a further 3 days and dug various other areas of interest along our suspected ingress and exit point and the firefight location as part of the hypothesis. We've then really been processing those objects, Ken, for probably, since January 2024. And so that's really the background to the raid. The German commander raid on the RAF St. Lawrence has been a pretty long-standing rumour on the Isle of Wight for many years, and I'm not saying that that's proof positive, but Adrian in his book did uncover a pretty significant document. Probably the best thing in the book actually was in the Newport archive. There is a lovely set of documents from the Civil Defence Headquarters. So where the ARP and the National Fire Service, police and other Coast Guard were ringing in and reports and what have you throughout the entire war. You had a sort of group of people taking messages down as they came in, and then obviously messages going out were recorded as well, all in the same book. And in book 11, I've seen it many times now, it's very delicious. At 2:30 in the morning, there's this lovely documented report, a special report from the police. The police report, 2 dinghies full of Germans seen in the sea off Ventnor. So it's phenomenal. Every time I see it, I get little goose pimples on my back. So as an example, we actually now know who actually called that message in to the police and then where it was called in from. And we talked a bit about that on the last podcast. But the objects that we found allowed us over the last year to really study them in some great depth. And the method the professor advised us to follow was to look at each group of live ammunition being fired and deal with it as a suspicious discharge. And then for each suspicious discharge, come up with 3 plausible reasons that why they may be there. Then pick one and tell me why you've picked that one. And so in following that method, we've actually been able to create some phenomenal context, which is a good thing because if we'd kind of gone to the public with what we'd found in these 3 other objects we're going to talk more detail about, before we had a full understanding of the context, it wouldn't have landed as hard as it has landed. So my new phrase this year is context is everything. Context is everything. And it's funny, I had a number of people come and ask me, Paul, how's it going? And I was talking to Peter Valinsky, who runs Entoyment, which is the best gaming store in the south of England. He's a great guy. And Alex Sutherland was kind of listening over my shoulder. And I sort of turned and I realised it was him. And he said, Paul, what I've heard there is phenomenal. You know, I'm really, really impressed. And I said, well, I'd love to talk to your professional more about that at some point. From a professional perspective, but having had a number of other archaeologists who've approached us, who we gave talks to, where we revealed what I'm going to reveal on your program today to the public for the first time on the 25th of April in St. Lawrence, which is entirely appropriate.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a bit of a background that brings us up to these 3 delicious single objects, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so the book was just kind of really taking it back to basics. The book is saying, or was saying, as the rumour says, as that book says, that on this night in August 1943, a group of Germans stepped foot on the Isle of Wight and attack, raid, however you want to describe it, the radar station. What was the name of it again, mate?
RAF St Lawrence.
RAF St Lawrence. So loads of background, as Paul has said, and lots of it. We talked in depth about it on the previous shows, and I think you were waiting for results and all sorts of things last time we spoke.
We were, yeah.
Lots of background work, and I deal in forensic stuff at work, and I was very impressed with the way that you were methodically dealing with it and the scientific methods that were being used. So I'll hand back to you, Paul, and just let us know what you found.
Okay, well, you're right about the scientific methods, because just as a good introduction to this, a few elements from the hypothesis. The hypothesis suggested that it were German Brandenburger commandos who carried out this raid. There was no more than 15 of them at any one time, and they were in and out in just about 2 hours. So it's not an invasion; it's literally a raid, a snatch and grab raid, on a much smaller scale, but very similar to the Bruneval raid that we did to their coast top radar station.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, unless you have a motive, you don't have a raid. And so there's a lot of work being done around the motive. And I still can't believe why others haven't seen it, because it's documented in some of the minutes between the meetings between Dönitz and Hitler. Things that he says, and the support that Hitler gives him when he talks about the reason why, not he needs a raid, of course, but actually the reason why that they are suffering so badly is due to an Allied detection device of an unknown type, and they need to create countermeasures to this. So that's a little snippet into the motive, and of course the people who came and did that raid were predominantly Brandenburgers, who are not members of the Army, Air Force, or Navy. They are part of the German Secret Service, or the Abwehr, at this point in time. And also the particular men who were selected for that had experience of working behind British lines in North Africa. In fact, quite extensive experience when you look into the unit itself. That in itself is a boy's own story, worthy of any war game, I'd suggest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm waiting to see the raid on RAF St Lawrence at a war game show soon.
It may be. I know Michael talked about it years ago when I first kind of run this past him, but it'd be a big old table. That's all I can say if it's 28 mil.
Not wrong with that, Paul. That's what the show's all about.
That's true, exactly, Ken. And yeah, I look forward to seeing the wonderful coastline created in miniature. Anyway,
I'm busy building fjords for Narvik at the moment. So
that's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Anyway, our hypothesis was that it's these German commandos using British weapons, of course, and using British uniforms to add an element of surprise and confusion to the enemy, which they had done many times before. So with that in mind, we found a great amount of spent ammunition in one place. And I think I showed you the picture of all these, of a gentleman called Tony Velder, who's kneeling in what became known as 9mm corner, because on the very cliff top
can't
edge,
see him for the flags, can you?
I know he's surrounded by a sea of little tags, which the drone picks up. And bear in mind, we thought we'd find 60 objects over 3 days. In the first day, this field's got 550, and he basically uncovered. He actually found 2 of the objects we're going to talk about, as well as a load of other things. So we'll lead into the context, really. So to describe it to people who've never been there or seen the pictures, and I'll send you a couple of images which you might want to use on your YouTube version of this. So it is a cliff top position, and below that, the cliff down to the small beach below, which is very rocky, is no matter than 45 feet from the top to the bottom. I mean, I'm 63 and I've shimmied up it loads of times. So a young, fit German commando would be up and down there, no problem at all. Now, it sits at the next to a large feature called the Sugarloaf. And by its nature, it's a large, sticky up rock domed formation, which emerges from the undulating cliff line, and by a natural culvert that spills down from that point. So on that edge would have been 3 lines of barbed wire. So on the initial cliff edge, then a matter of 20 feet, a secondary line, and then a third line about at the edge of our first 40-metre box. Now, we found the lines 2 and 3 because the cliff edge has unfortunately eroded away. We lost the first line and probably a number of artefacts as well. But we certainly know from images and other things that they would have had barbed wire on the cliff edge. So there would have been 3 lines. So within those 3 lines of barbed wire, there is an old stone wall. It's a very large feature from one side, and then it stands 6 foot. But on the other side, you're only kind of 2.5 foot from the top to bottom. It kind of helps separate the ground a little, and it forms what in the military call a re-entrant feature, or an area called a covered approach, where you could enter this re-entrant feature. Once you've cut your way through the barbed wire, you can move undercover and not be seen directly towards the radar station. So a very good point to select. The hypothesis suggested it was the perfect place to navigate towards when approaching a distant enemy shore. You really need a nice navigational feature. Well, the Sugarloaf goes up about 130 feet straight up from an undulating cliff edge. So that was part of the hypothesis. So in that area and amongst all these finds, in 9 mil corner, the context, we found clearly Tony was sitting on the middle of a line of barbed wire. We found the bases of the silent pickets, the things that look like pig's tails. We call them curly pig's tails. And of course, above that would have been a stake with 3 or 4 hoops in it for wire. Some of them we've actually got the full or 3/4 of the stake, but mostly just the pigtail. But of course, that tells us that's where a line of wire was. Now, right in the middle of that line of wire, and because we forensically examined all of these objects that are related to today, there are 81 9mm cartridges fired by 2 Sten guns. So every cartridge went through a process of being analysed. It takes about 2 hours for each one under high magnification to identify what forensics people call breech face marks, size and depth of firing pin and location of firing pin. And they're not fingerprints as such, but they are pretty unique. And from that, you can determine if it's the same weapon that fired it. And across the whole site, actually, when you analyze these cartridges forensically, you can actually retrace almost the footsteps of men who fired them, because you can tie them to one gun, which is one shooter. Yeah. Well, in this case, 2 gentlemen seem to have stopped here, turned and emptied at least a couple of magazines each in what appears to be sitting on the barbed wire. Now clearly they weren't doing that. So I think it's fair to assume that's where the wire was cut. And that's for both the entry and exit. So in this small area, which is now within 10 feet of the current cliff edge line, there would have been a gap in the wire and 81 9mm rounds fired by just 2 Sten guns. Now, in the field itself, the wider field, the reason for there being so many contacts is, of course, because somebody had a good reason to throw 3 British hand grenades almost into and at this central point where the Sten gunners were firing. So we found the remains of 3 number 36 mil bombs, hand grenades. We found the base plugs, which are quite close. Of course, much of the fragmentation, the actual outer part of the grenade, goes a lot further. I mean, you can't throw it far enough that it won't come back and hit you. So when you throw it, you need to find some kind of cover. And of course, if you throw it into your own defence lines, i.e. close barbed wire defences, you possibly would shred those. So one of the hypotheses, of course, was, well, perhaps this was a training exercise, and it's a possible, plausible reason. But as we were able to determine that, well, firstly, there's a perfectly good training ground for grenades less than 2 miles away up on Ventnor Down. Secondly, you wouldn't throw grenades here as a practice exercise, because it is not safe by any shape or means at all. And thirdly, you'd be wrecking some of your own defences. So that really is a plausible reason. Now, the other beautiful thing, and we got so excited when this happened, we found the spoons of the grenade. So the spoon is the lever that sits on the side of the hand grenade. So when you pull the pin, of course, you're only holding it in with the hand that's about to throw the grenade. And as you throw that grenade, that spoon or that lever will fly off. And typically it will land somewhere between the thrower and where the grenade was aimed. Well, because we found all 3 spoons, we know roughly a broad angle backwards from where it was thrown, which again it's just phenomenal work and tells us so much. The effort is worth the outcome.
Yeah, definitely.
So in amongst this field of things, there were 3 9mm rounds which didn't look like any other 9mm rounds we found. So we found 139 9mm rounds on the entire site. Most were made in Blackpool near Worcester. Some were made in Wales, much to the great pleasure of my Welsh friend who was part of this dig, Tony, who's ex-soldier and Welsh unit Dragoon Guards. So he was quite pleased to find those. Yeah. And then 11, I think, were found made by Western Repeating Arms. And they was actually the much poorer ammunition that was given to, we believe, the RAF men, because it comes from their position as they made an approach to that wall. But anyway, 3 objects stood out, and they had different firing pins. The firing pin of a Sten gun is pretty easy to spot. It's a bit like a dome with a sharp tip on it. So whereas these things look more like a fat boy's finger pushed into a bar of butter. So no sharp point, as it were, on these things. So we were then faced with, well, how can we identify these cartridges? All the others were made by Western Repeating Arms, British companies, 1943 dated. The Western Repeating Arms not dated 43 at all. So almost the very latest manufactured ammunition from British sources. Apart from these 3 that we found, which had a cartridge mark or the head stamp, which had a strange font P and 2 5-pointed stars with a raised center. Now, it was the internet will tell you a few things, but it's by no means to be relied upon entirely. And so it became quite obvious that we needed to get some specialist input into trying to understand, well, who made these strange 9mm cartridges, and clearly they're not fired by a Sten gun because the firing pin is totally different.
Yeah.
The other question, of course, is that your listeners may be asking, and certainly we've had the question before at talks, is, well, if these were German commandos using British weapons, how did they get the latest 1943 dated ammunition? Well, that's actually relatively easy to answer when you understand something called the Dutch Bureau. So the Dutch Bureau was the German intelligence cell in the Netherlands that were breaking many of the SOE agents who were being flown into all parts of Europe and certainly into the Netherlands. And unfortunately for us, the Germans were pretty successful in intercepting, capturing, and then sometimes breaking those agents and using their codes to order in or to understand where other agents would be dropped. Well, one Otto Skorzeny in his records talks a little bit about the Dutch Bureau, and I'll share that with you if I may, because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
He was in German intelligence at the time earlier in 1943, and he visited the Dutch Bureau and was told about these activities where they were breaking British agents and getting British weapons. And on one of the papers that were captured, there was mention of the ability to have a silenced pistol. Now, the Germans didn't have silenced pistols at this time, and so Skorzeny was quite interested, and basically he asked the Dutch Bureau to use the code of the latest agent captured to order one.
Nice.
And according to his book, it's a bit like Amazon, because within 48 hours they dropped one
Airdrop.
off. I don't think they got a signature, mind you, but they dropped one off, and so within 48 hours, Skorzeny is in his office on the first story of this building in the Netherlands, and he gets this pistol. I believe it was a revolver with a silencer on it. And to test it, he leant out the window and he shot a duck below in the canal. And of course, he was looking to see if anyone around noticed. Well, according to him, no one walking near the canal even noticed. The duck did, because he didn't survive it. But that was an example of how German intelligence were able to access the latest British munitions and weapons. So there was a ready supply of British weapons and the latest ammunition available to these commandos who did this raid. So our star P-star objects. Well, the internet revealed to us a possible source for them, which caused some great excitement in the team because it suggested they were made by an Austrian company called Hertenberger. Hertenberger have been in the business of making ammunition but since 1864, I think it is. And of course, the heady days of the First World War for them as a munition factory had now passed. And they, like Germany, were subject to the Versailles Treaty. So I got some information through before I carry on the story, and all this comes mainly from someone called Curtis Steinhauer, who's not German. He's Canadian and he lives in Toronto, and he's a very, very good man. He is cited by others as the world's expert on cartridge-based identification. He regularly updates a vast catalogue of known cartridges to those who are interested in collecting such things. I mean, I thought people who collected model buses were bad, but these guys are.
This is a new level.
This is geekdom going to places no other geek's been before. But anyway,
Brilliant.
no, I don't mean to be rude to him, because he was incredibly generous to us with his time and with his information. The other source, of course, was the International Ammunition Association, who, again, they actually have the only known copy of a Star P Star cartridge, 9mm cartridge. So from them, we were able to gain first knowledge is that they are extremely rare. Well, that doesn't help us much, because we want to research them. Bloody hell, So we've already got these possibly Austrian-made bullets sitting on a cliff-top location in amongst the context field I've described to you. And so Curtis was able to elaborate a lot more. He actually sent me lots and lots of pictures of Hertenberger manufactured ammunition. And there is one hell of a story, which for wargamers, I hope you'll find interesting, because I found it truly fascinating. So Hertenberger, well, obviously their business was cut down to nothing after the First World War. Subject to the Versailles Treaty, 1919, they were limited to making extremely small volumes of ammunition for local police duties only. So what they did was they set up a factory in the Netherlands in 1924-25, because the Netherlands, of course, was never part of the Versailles Treaty.
Good thinking.
Yeah, and from there they set up to 7 lines for production, and they were making 9mm ammunition as well as other ammunition, and they were exporting it. And I use the word exports, and I'm kind of making quotation marks above my head at the time, because because although they were exported, as Curtis said, during the interwar period, a lot of ammunition that was sold was often backdoored into other countries where it wasn't allowed. So that puts an air of mystery over them straight away. And following that through, the Hertenberger markings are from the Dordrecht factory, often have a date, but they also have a 5-pointed star with a raised center, and also a 6-pointed star with no raised center, a 5-pointed star with no raised center, different font Ps. They also use H as well as P. So they used a variety of markings on what I've now learned is they're called bunters. So the base of bullets in the trade are known as bunters. And so the bunters are basically customized to the customer's requirements. So main export went to Latvia, China, and South America. Now, the South American connection is something we had to follow through, because a similar group of interested people went to Norway with permission and were able to do a ground study survey of one of the crash sites of the gliders used by the British commandos on their raid on Telemark.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so this has links to the Telemark raid, in that what they found was one extremely poor condition Hertenberger round in a crash site of a British commando plane. Now, the round in question, the primer, the bit in the middle which initiates the cartridge, had burnt out and blown off. The sides had split, which is typical of you drop a bullet in a fire, and that's what happens when you cook it. It's called cooking off. And so, but what did remain, of course, was the markings on the bunter. And the bunter shows a P, 2 stars, 2 bars in between each of these, and then the date 1934. So most, but not all, according to Curtis, the Hertenberger rounds exported from the Netherlands to South America had a P on them, or a H, but not all. And they nearly all had dates on them. So then we have to ask ourselves, what are a bunch of British commandos doing with Austrian-made ammunition, which ended up cooking off in the crash site of a glider in Norway on the Telemark raid? Well, by doing a lot of research, helped by Curtis, he pointed us at some documents available from Kew in the archive that suggest that Britain, desperate for 9mm ammunition and not having the manufacturing line set up to produce it, we were buying 9mm ammunition for the initial release of the Sten gun from all kinds of sources. Hence why we found the Western repeating arms. munitions, which are primarily pistol rounds. Actually, they've only got 115 grains of powder in them, and the more modern, better bullets, i.e., the ones made in Blackpool in 1943, had 145 grains, so much more punch, which is much more reliable way of recycling the bolt in the Sten gun.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why these Hurtenbergers were chosen by these commandos, it's speculated, is because they didn't want that old rubbish from America that doesn't work very well. They wanted the good stuff, the Hurtenberg stuff, because this was prime quality stuff. And so Britain actually purchased 20 million rounds of 9mm ammunition from Bolivia in 1941. A little known World War II fact.
Yeah.
And why did Bolivia have 20 million, well, probably a lot more rounds? They fired a lot at Paraguay because they had a big punch up with Paraguay in the Gran Chaco War of 32 to 35, of which I've had a number of war gamers who actually do war game that period. So
Wow. That's obscure.
It is obscure. It is obscure. So these 9mm rounds ended up coming back through the British Purchasing Commission in America, which was in America before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and America joined the war. And they were then brought back to Britain, and they were issued to British troops in the late 41 to 42 period. And interestingly, they were issued, according to Curtis, in the original Spanish cartridge boxes, which were all written in Spanish language. So quite what the RAF would have made of those when they got given RAF regiment if they'd have been given them. But we had to explore the possibility that the rounds we'd found, these possibly Austrian-made rounds, we found on a cliff-top location on the Isle of Wight near a radar station where there's evidence of a firefight, didn't come from that source, i.e. from the British Purchasing Commission, and came back and issued to British troops. So it was an avenue we went down. It was a roller coaster ride because we thought, actually, these could just be rounds fired off by British commandos doing some kind of exercise. This firefight we're seeing may be part of that. Well, fortunately, Curtis and the International Ammunition Association were able to confirm to us that the P star rounds that we have were more than likely made after 1936. They certainly weren't from the Dordrecht factory, because Germany, of course, started to ignore the Versailles Treaty in 1934 when they reoccupied the Rhineland. And Hurtenberger themselves actually closed down their Dordrecht factory and brought it all back to Austria. And so they were making these rounds. And by 1937, they had the full production line set up again. And they were producing about 1 million 9mm cartridges a day for both Germany and Italy. So, and of course, the Spanish Civil War was a period happening in 36 onwards. And that's the only known source for the ones that do exist within the catalogues of the International Ammunition Association. Curtis had never seen them, but he was aware of these artifacts. He's got a collection of Hurtenberger-made rounds which could fill a page on your computer screen. He sent many of them to me, and I was very, very grateful. And none of them matched our one. So they gave me some conclusions. We're working towards conclusions here, and the final conclusion came from Curtis to us in early March. And what he said to me was that we can say that they're not part of that batch that Britain bought because they're not from the Dordrecht factory. They are most likely from a batch that was made and used possibly in Spain by German units in Spain. And they were definitely made by Hurtenberger. Beyond that, he said that the problem is with Hurtenberger is most of the records were destroyed before the end of the war, along with the Hurtenberg factory, actually. And so records are quite hard to come by, and that's the best he could do. But he did remind me and said, but Paul, you are very fortunate. Most of the cartridges I get sent to identify are new, still in boxes. They're part of people's collections or museums, and they've never been fired. And so sourcing them is actually harder. What you have, of course, is context.
Yeah.
Your cartridges were found with other things, and importantly, your cartridges were fired by a certain gun. If you can identify the gun, and you can obviously understand the context more fully of where they were found, that surely will give you more information outside of confirming they were made by an Austrian company. So, and he was quite right. And so working with Professor Simons, we were able to kind of build that context more fully by March, which is 14 months after we did the dig. But then, of course, we had to discover what weapon fired these bullets, Ken.
Yeah.
So, and that was a challenge. Remember, the firing pin isn't like a sharp pencil tip. This is like a finger going into butter, albeit a small finger. And so a number of firing pin types were looked at, and we were somewhat thrown because we were only expecting to find British weapons firing these things. But one firing pin, well, there were three favourites, but one that ended up being the actual firing pin. We worked with various shooting associations, mainly in America, because they're still allowed to have guns. We're not.
Yeah.
The Walther P38 Shooting Association were very, very helpful. They were able to provide us with some comparative pistol fired rounds as comparison pictures. Even some came from their Australian branch as well, which was really helpful. And then we also got the full trigger schematics of the Walther P38. And from that, of course, we were able to measure the size of the firing pin. And then importantly, the protrusion, i.e. how deep it penetrates the back of the primer. So we got those measurements. There's a 2 mil firing pin and it's a 1.2 mil protrusion. So then we had to measure the 3 Hertenberger rounds. And my back's tingling as I tell you this, because as we measured and cleaned them and prepared the probes and got the very tiny measurement material together, bugger me, they're all 2 mil firing pins by 1.2 mil protrusions. They are a perfect match for the Walther P38 German service pistol, but with the early firing pin.
Wow.
So, yeah, I know. We were just kind of... So all three of us checked it because I didn't want just me checking it. I got others to check it and see if they got the same conclusions, because it's quite a significant discovery, in fact. And when I showed this to Professor Simons, he was quite elated. I'll share you some of his markings on my homework after this. He said, well, Paul, these now with the context, your context is everything. Your context is clearly of a firefight on a clifftop edge within 3 lines of barbed wire, into which 3 hand grenades have been thrown deliberately, and 2 men have turned and fired submachine guns as cover. And then someone just slightly to the rear of that position has decided to fire a Walther P38 service pistol 3 times.
Wow.
I know. Wow was kind of, yeah.
And I think the outstanding thing for me with this is that you, as you said in previous chats that we've had, you've gone about this systematically, and you've not gone, there's a German firing a German gun here. You've got the casings and worked backwards to this point we're at now, where there is proof of a German pistol being found, and then that leads you on to these hypotheses that you're talking about with Professor Simons.
Yeah, and thank you. It's we could have made a mistake and said, oh, we found some Austrian bullets, therefore Austrian equals German, and therefore big assumptions. It's been quite the opposite of that, and the team were quite keen on, wow, that's great. And it's like, no, we need 2 expert opinions, because this is beyond our capability to look up. We bought a number of books on cartridges, but none of them would have given us half of what's in Curtis's head. And so you're right. We had to get, and of course, we didn't really understand the context over a year ago. We were still building the context and understanding it in depth by forensically analysing all the other component parts. The fact that we mapped all the grenade fragments that we found in this field, and then finding the spoons, we're able to actually determine the line of throw of these grenades. That takes a lot of work, but the answers it gives you is just phenomenal. So you're kind of right, really. And so Professor Simon said, well, these now are significant artifacts, and in the scientific tradition, Paul, you have to name them after the location they were found.
Yeah.
And so we now proudly have the St. Lawrence Hertenbergers.
Nice.
Which sounds like a Jewish crime mafia family, and it's not. It's the location of St. Lawrence where we found them, and Hertenbergers being the manufacturer, and the fact that they're fired by a Walther P38 pistol is just the delicious icing on the cake, really. And we haven't really looked bigger outside of this is probably the only real hard evidence of a German commander raid on British soil, even though it probably is, but we're not kind of going out to the wider press and saying that. So we, after working with the landowner, who's been absolutely superb, and get his permission for us to go public with this information, subject to the professor's confirmation and his homework marking on that he gave me. We built it into a presentation which we gave in St Lawrence. We planned the talk back in February, and it was already oversubscribed. So we actually did it on Saturday and Sunday to accommodate the local people who are keen to come and see and hear about these things. And it's the first time I've ever had people listening to me going, ooh, and as we're releasing and telling this delicious story to the public for the first time. And it was quite a moment. So it represents a major milestone in this raid investigation, as you and the listeners can probably now appreciate.
Yeah.
And of course, it's the reason why my bloody website's not been put back together, because I've been involved in, every schoolboy's dream of being involved in this World War II adventure, I call it, on my doorstep, with all the right permissions, doing all the right investigations with a team of really good mates and people who are serving and non-serving military, helping and assisting us. It's just bloody fantastic, Ken.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. And the further you go into it, and as a result of these podcasts, the further I and the listeners go into it, the more of a story is emerging from these findings that you got from the original archaeological survey.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I do call it. I call the exhibition and talks "Nothing to See Here," because, of course, officially this never happened, and so there should be nothing to see here. But when I introduced the concept of the third witness, which I borrowed from another author, to this story, the third witness being the ground, and what can the ground tell us about what happened in the past? And this story has given me some absolutely bizarre connections that I never saw coming. And there's one of those connections which I'll share with you, because it relates to artifacts. So if you look today at what archaeologists and historians refer to in terms of a historical source, the definition comes from a German professor called Paul Kern, Kirns, Paul Kern's definition, and it's still accepted and widely used today. And his definition is that all texts, objects, or facts from which knowledge of the past can be gained can be classified as a historical source. And obviously our objects, our St. Lawrence Hurtenburgers, tell us a lot about what happened on that clifftop edge back at the time of this raid, in terms of a man firing 3 rounds from a Walther pistol as part of the firefight and extraction of those commandos. Now, here's the connection. One of Professor Kern's leading students, a man who actually ended up doing his doctorate under Professor Kern, and then actually studied under him and created the Frankfurt Archive, historical archive. He rebuilt it from the damage of the war, and then took over from Professor Kern in his role as head archivist, was a man called Dietrich Andernacht. And Dietrich Andernacht is the German from where we gain information, because he reluctantly provided information backing up his claim that he was part of this raid on RAF St. Lawrence.
Wow.
I know, it's just kind of like, I would not have thought that a student of Kern, who defines a historical source, would be one of the people who's actually provided some really interesting witness testimony in terms of his participation in this raid. There you go.
Deeper and deeper, mate. Deeper and deeper.
It's a lovely connection.
It is. It's amazing. So have you still got items that are being examined and looked at from that original dig, or have you managed to get through all of them?
We have, Ken. We've still got a lot more. We found a lot of artifacts in those fields and in other areas approaching that old stone wall. We believe we've got what looks like a classic fire and approach action as they approach the wall to deploy those grenades. We're still working on that. but the most delicious. And I've deliberately saved this to last because I didn't want to rush in and kind of eat my cream pudding before I had my main course and starter. Is a selection of artifacts that we found in a very strategic point on this field. So the story goes from Andernach and another German who gave a testimony was that one of their party was shot and subsequently died on the return trip via the U-boat. And we think we have the evidence of that shooter in that there are a number of Springfield rifle rounds, so P-17 Springfield rifle rounds, fired from the prone position at the most perfect enfilading position where these Germans would have been on the Old Stone Wall. And his first shot, probably his best shot, would have been the one that winged one of them Germans putting covering fire down as the main party made it back behind that wall. So that's a big leap. I can't back any of that up at the moment other than speculate. Unlike we can absolutely back up with fact the St. Lawrence Hurtenbergers. And I don't want to rush into it because there's some delicious family connections with the person who we think is the shooter. He is the most perfectly profiled person. He lives there. He's played there as a boy all his life. He's an ex-First World War Isle of Wight rifleman who's fought in the night battles around Gaza. So he knows his
stuff.
He knows his stuff. He knew that he had to be on his belly when he fired. Now, we know that those first set of rounds were fired from a prone position because the very tight cluster of rounds, they're only a 5-round magazine in a Springfield rifle. So as you bolt action the next one in, it's got very short distance to fall from where you fired it. And so once he's emptied his 5 rounds, he's then rolled and moved. But because he's prone, they've not fallen very far and they've not scattered. As opposed to someone standing or kneeling and shooting, the scatter of the ejected bolt action rounds would have been somewhat bigger. So they're very tight, compact little rounds. So he's emptied his mag, fired 5, rolled over, reloaded, fired from another place. He's a veteran. He knows not to stay in the same place and keep firing. But we're still building it. It even looks like him and his wife were running a cafe right next to the site. It's called it's called the Tea Gardens. And he took it over with his wife in 1937. And the story goes that when war started, she still retained the cigarette license and she supplied troops who were occupying and defending the coast with tea, coffee, fags, and somewhere nice to sit and talk, nowhere near the mess or on station. And so, it's everyone who I've spoke to who's either served or part of who still serve today. And I've run that scenario past them and they've all said, yeah, we'd be there every bloody day if we could. There's nothing better than getting away from the naff tea and the naffy or the produced on camp. If there's a lady down there, and fresh slabs of fruitcake from Ventnor's Bakery. We even know the name of the baker. So I know we're filling in little bits of detail, which I think it is very much the delicious ending of the actual ground study story if it carries on. I'm aware of my bias and I have to park that sometimes in terms of when I'm looking at evidence and information. But with the families helping us, they provided pictures of him, they provided history of him, the history that's been found of him as part of the Auxiliary Coast Guard in the area. He was even the key holder for the station just up on the cliff. So if he wasn't on duty that night, they'd have come and got him. There's loads more, Kim. We'll have to say that for another time because I'm aware I've been gassing for an hour. But I hope that gives everyone a delicious insight into, we've got more work to do. We found more objects than we ever dreamed we would. We're still processing it, and we're trying to process it in this scientific manner of questioning plausible reasons, pulling every plausible reason apart, picking one and telling Professor Simons why we picked that one with all the evidence. And he marked my homework, so I will share with you because it is quite delicious. I think I shared it with Alex actually, just briefly. So he gave me, well, you've proved this, Paul. You've now got proof of a German attack, and then in big letters, you've done it! !
Nice.
And then below that, he says, "God, it's good."
Oh, bless him.
Yeah, so I think I got an A+ on that homework on that one.
Not bad at all, mate. And is the plan at the end to do a book, or where do you think you'll end up when you've got the story, if you ever get the story?
Yeah, well, I have started the book. The lovely gentleman who owns the land in that area, I would often go and enjoy some very fine afternoon tea or coffee with him, or tea actually with him, and we would talk over the various evidence and make sure he's happy for me to release it, because it's his land, his property effectively, that's involved. And he actually said, Paul, you must put this into a book. This is our local history, and you must record it and you must put it into a book. The exhibitions we do, of course, are designed to bring more local stories out to us. People come and share them with us, and we would try and record those as best we can. But so I've done 26,000 words so far. I don't know how many chapters that is, Ken. I've never written a book before in my life.
Is that 26,000 different words?
Yes. Yeah.
Not the same words,
but not necessarily in the same order. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I do use the word German and commando quite a lot, and I deliberately spell it the German way with a K. And of course, commando is plural as well as singular. I never was much good at English at school, but with the benefit of spell checkers and other things, I'm making progress. I've got some good people around me who are being brilliant at supporting it by editing it and looking at grammar and other such things. So, but all the facts, all the details come from myself and a team. It's not just me. There's a couple of really good guys on the island who are working with us very closely. A group of us did the legwork on Project Windhoek over 3 days, digging in January in a bloody windy corner on the Isle of Wight next to the ocean. And it was on the windy side of the Isle of Wight as well, this bit. So yeah, it's a team effort. It's not just me. I just happen to be the kind of mouthpiece, really, because I seem to have absorbed it more than the rest and I've pushed it harder than everyone else. But no, we really, and we delight in it. We delight in people looking at the story and learning about it, and then them sharing stories with us. We had a couple more shared with us. We took the exhibition when I broke down in the van before Partisan to a VE Day celebration. And we got, again, 2 more stories from people I'd never met before, came and shared a little story. One was as a boy, he would play on the site, and what we now know is OP1, observation point 1. He said, "Oh, you do realise there was a little path down to the beach below OP1?" I said, "No, I didn't." And of course, we got a large blow-up map on the exhibition, and we went over and looked at it. And if you look closely, bear in mind it has been pixelated a little bit, but you can clearly see the very steep stepping of the little path down from OP1. So we didn't know what that was. We just thought it was part of the graphic. But actually, this man came and said, as a boy, we would use that, and I know exactly where he meant, because there's a soil pipe coming out the cliff, which was the Kazi from the transmitter room.
Right, got you.
So it's just next to that. He went, that's the one. So so we learn all the time, and it's a tiny little detail. But when we come to tell the story, we can, in truth, relate that from OP1 there was a path down to the beach.
And are there any plans, or have you got any more talks or exhibitions booked in on the island or elsewhere?
Yes. So we've got one on the 28th of May, which is fully booked already. It was 2 weeks ago, actually. And we're doing some more at the White Aviation Museum in June and in July. And then there's another one in August as well planned. So, and I've having people asking, what's the next bit? What's the next bit? We made the mistake, really, of calling it part 1 and part 2. And of course, people well, I didn't, but the ladies who organised the village hall did, and I'm not going to blame them. And of course, there was an expectation. Well, where's part 3? And do we need to have seen part 1 and 2 to do part 3? And it's like, no, they all stand on their own in some ways. So, and it's not about pushing the story to the wider public. I think that the right people will come to us. We've had a couple of sniffs from credible sources, people who do these kind of programs with credibility. So I know the right ones will find us for us to tell that story on a wider stage, if that is what we decide to do. I have lamented and told the South Wight Chronicle, which is a real mainstream media. Not really. It's got a circulation of about 1,000 copies once a month on the south part of the Isle of Wight. And the only reason is because the editor, bless him, he lives in a cottage overlooking Woody Bay, and where we did the dig. And he came over and said, "What are you lot doing then?" So ever since then, he's a local interested man. And so I write the editorial for him, and it's out in the June copy of the Chronicle about the Hurtenburgers, or the St. Lawrence Hurtenburgers. And we'll keep it low key. It's our local history. We'll keep it local until we keep researching. We've still got more to find. We know the motive, we know who did it, we know what they were after and why, and we can see how they use what they found to help them with the motive. So those things are taken from German documents and stories. So, but we've still got to fill lots of gaps in. The little detail, like the fact that the person who we call him Woody because it's Woody Bay, that's not his real name, but we'll just use Woody for now. The person we call Woody owned and his wife run a tea shop next to a garrison, which would have been used. It's the little detail like that. It's the other detail that the station officer who was on St. Lawrence, who has given a testimony, you can listen to it on the Imperial War Museum taped records and interviews. She was organising stage shows to keep the garrison interested, and of course. Our Woody happened to be the man who organised all of the stage productions for the Royal National Hospital. So there's no doubt those two would have got together at some point with him helping her. I mean, he helped Tommy Trinder. Tommy Trinder was a comedian.
Tommy Trinder.
So 1950.
Now we're going back.
Well, Tommy Trinder got his early breaks in Ventnor, of all places, on Ventnor Pier. And it was our Woody who helped him with the stage and lighting management. And so our Woody was called as of someone to come and meet Tommy Trinder on This Is Your Life 1959. So it's that level of detail we're getting to now, which when I do write the book is going to make it hopefully a really delicious thing to enjoy.
Well, we need to start thinking about casting for the Hollywood blockbuster, mate. We need to.
I'm laughing. I was just Tony Velder, my good friend and Welshman. He said, "Well, when they come to do the film, it's what's his name? Hemsby, is it? Oh God, he's played lots of different interesting parts. He's an Australian actor. I think. The bloke with the big hammer. I think he played Chris.
Thor. Chris Helmsworth.
That's it, Hemsworth. Sorry, I got it wrong. Yeah. He said Chris Hemsworth's got to play him, and I said, well, my only stamping on the table is that and an act, he's got to be ginger. Okay, that's fair enough.
I don't know. I don't know who because it used to be like Rutger Hauer and Robert Vaughan always seemed to ended up as a German in the World War II films.
He did, yeah.
Of course, all those people have gone now, so I don't know who is your go-to German baddie to play the leader of the German raid, but I'm sure somebody will come make some suggestions.
Yeah, as long as it's ginger, I don't mind. We of course we joke and we have a little bit of a giggle about it, but when it's right, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. Anyway, so when it's right, this local story may get some traction, it may not. We don't really care. I think I've said this before. We very much take the attitude, and as Professor Simmons said it to me, actually, he said, Paul, you do realise, even though you've got this magnificent milestone in your investigation now, there will always be people for which the bar is never high enough, and they will never believe it. And my approach to that is very simple. When we talk to people about this story, I don't care if they believe it as a raid or not. I really don't. We just enjoy talking to people about and telling them about what we found and the process we've used to find it and the delicious World War story that creates. If people don't believe it, that's fine. We'll just turn around and talk to people who are interested and maybe more open-minded. But I do appreciate there will be people who the bar will never be high enough to meet their criteria of being believable. And that's fine. That's them. We'll just focus on the ones who are interested in it.
Yeah, no, I think you'll find that with anything, Paul, that some people are not prepared to believe anything, and I think what you've got with this story is not only the credibility of the evidence that you've got. We've talked about the context, but we've also got, I think, what you've got is plausibility, because it's not just a group of random Germans coming to get a cup of tea and steal some Ventnor bakery cake. No. You've got plausible reasons for them being there. You've looked at who's done it, why they've done it. It's all believable. And then after the war, during the war, is there any reason why they wouldn't want the rest of the British public to know? course the fuck it is.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want Mrs. Jenkins down at number 37 going, bloody Germans were on bloody beach yesterday.
Aye.
Bloody hell! I thought we were winning war. And then I talked to somebody else about this at the weekend about an entirely different thing. But when it gets to the end of the war, and it's no longer as important to keep it secret, people aren't interested anymore because you've got rationing, you've got bloody, rebuilding the country. We're in massive debt, and people have got other things to worry about. So now, with the distance of time, this is the time, I think, for stories like this to come out and be examined and looked at. And I think you've done a cracking job, mate. You really have.
Oh, Ken, that's very, very kind and a great way to summarise it. It's, the part of the stuff we've uncovered does a gathering storm of evidence for the very rapid and actually quite aggressive cover-up activity that took place from the day after the raid. So from the Tuesday, so this all happened in the very early hours of Monday morning, but by the Tuesday, the coastal ban that was implemented was being reported in London newspapers, and then it escalates from that point onwards. Where I take my guidance that Max Hastings, in one of his books about the Falklands War, wrote that the government has a duty to cover up things that are of benefit to the enemy, and it's the same with this raid. It would have been a massive benefit to the enemy if the British public had got to find out about it. From a morale perspective, Churchill made a boast after the war that no German jackboot ever set foot on British soil. That was made after the war. That was a retrospective, and it was because of what was happening at the end of the war that bold statement was made to stiffen the spine of the British public in the face of adversity. So governments have a duty to cover these things up. I've no problem with that at all, and in fact. This is not meant to be a teaser, and it really, really isn't a teaser. We actually know the real reason why it was covered up so rapidly and so aggressively, beyond those statements we just made about, well, for morale and for other reasons. There is a very clear reason why it was covered up when it happened on that day, and why it was covered up on that day. And that story is, I won't even go into it now, but it's a story in its own. And it goes to places that you would never imagine. I was in with the archivist of the Ventnor Historical Archive, the secretary of the society, who I didn't realise at the time. Actually, I've been spending many hours in there, and his name's Jeff. And he actually, American chap, had given lectures to the American Senate, and he'd also given lectures on. Basically big government decisions and probabilities, and he knew an awful lot about the subject matter of why the raid was covered up. So I didn't realize he knew so much, and he actually sent me one of the papers he'd submitted to President Obama. So this is quite a high level academic fellow. And so we were talking, and then I said, so Jeff, what date did that happen then? Oh, that was then. I said, what date did this raid that I'm looking at happen? And he looked at me and his eyes flared. I went, you get it, don't you? You now know why it was covered up so rapidly. And he's like, oh my God, Paul, we need to talk about this more. He's in America for about 6 weeks. So I hope I was listening, and he does come back. It's when that breaks, Ken, and it needs some telling. I need to get these bits out of the way, but it's again, it takes this story to places that I would never have imagined when I first went down there 8.5 years ago that we had a story that linked to that part of World War II. It's phenomenal.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, mate. Well, thank you very much for your time again today, Paul, and including the audience in this amazing story. It really is good, and I'm sure we've got something else planned, haven't we, mate? That is top secret at the moment.
Yes,
very top secret. But it's the listeners will hear that in a few, hopefully, in a couple of months' time. Yeah. And I'm sure when we've got some further updates, Paul, you'll come back and tell us.
I will, mate. And thank you so much for hosting me and listening to me babble on for an hour and 15 minutes about something. It's been very close to my heart, and I hope is of interest to other war gamers and those interested in military history out there. Ken, you're a star. Thank you so much.
No, mate, no worries, mate. It's a fascinating story, and it's lovely to be part of it. So, thanks very much, Paul. Just say good night to everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Good night, everyone. So there you have it. German rounds found on the cliff top in the Isle of Wight. The story thickens. I am really, really enjoying this journey, as the kids say today, with Paul John, this World War II German raid. And with the original book, I know there was a lot of negative comments from historians, etc. And a couple of them have approached me with that's a load of bollocks. And fair dinkum to, as my old mate down South Carlo would say, Carlo Pagano, fair dinkums to Paul. He's done a cracking job and methodically got the evidence, and this location of 3 cartridges fired from a German pistol is amazing stuff. And I know there's lots of stuff that Paul isn't sharing with us at the moment, can't share, etc. I know he's got a book, and I know there's other investigations going on elsewhere in relation to stuff that means that he can't reveal everything on the show. I'm grateful that he's revealing what he does on the show, to be fair, and I'm sure he'll come back and speak to us again about this. And at some stage, it's going to break wider with media, and as we discussed earlier in the episode, there could be a Hollywood blockbuster. So I'm hoping, Steven Spielberg will see it, and the first kind of section, the first scene of the film is going to be me and Paul doing the podcast, and I don't know. A younger Don Johnson can play me. Uh, whoever wants to play Paul, obviously, a Ginner would have to do it. But that could be the opening scene, and it could do the wibbly wobbly time shift thing and go to the cliffs on the Isle of Wight, and go from there with. I think we decided on Chris Helmsworth, didn't we, as the British hero, and we were undecided on German baddies at this moment in time. So, as mentioned earlier, the next episode will be the Summer Brews in the Vineyard, hopefully recording on the 6th of June. So, not long to go to the next episode. If you've not done already, get yourself down to the Yorkshire Gamer Facebook page, get voting in the World Cup of Wargaming Pet Hates. And until I see you next time, enjoy your wargaming, and bob down to the Yorkshire Gamer YouTubes for the monthly update, see what I'm actually doing in the hobby, and have a great month. And I'll see you very soon. Till then, so they.